geek? We are back with Chad, and we're gonna finish out the slime creature. Well, we're gonna finish something on the slime creature, not completely finish it up. We're gonna add some collision meshing. So this is important because you don't want to be walking through the monsters. So Chad's gonna show you how to do that. And then in our next videos, we may start getting into the animation portion, which we promised you in the last video, but we were just being a little too excitable, I think, there, because there's a couple more things we need to tweak before we do that. And in this week's video, we're sponsored by Corona Extra. Actually, we're not, but it's delicious. And Cinco de Mayo, we had to have some Coronas and get that action in there. But go ahead and take it away. We are back in Blender. This is the slime creature we created, and now we're going to add some collision meshing.
All right, I think I need to put on the screencast so people can see what I'm doing. Let me do that real quick. Make sure that's working. Okay, there we go. So what we need to do is actually create a hierarchy for this creature. So I need an extra screen. So you notice when I put my cursor right at one of the edges, any of these edges, you can click right and split area, and you'll get this little split seam looking thing, and just left click again, and I get another window that I can change here. And I need this one to be which one was it? Outliner. And I'm going to bring that up a little bit. I need that to see a hierarchy of the actual environment that we're creating. So again, we want to create a collision mesh for this creature in order so that bullets hit it and don't go through it, and your player won't go through it as well.
So these are like layers in the picture, right? I've got render layers, world, camera, all those are separate items.
Right.
If I click in them over there, it selects them, I assume.
So the camera comes standard with any Blender application that you start up. So we don't need the camera, so we'll go ahead and delete that out. We will not be needing the lamp, so we'll delete that out. You might need these things if you render inside of Blender, so keep that in mind. Actually, I'm going to put that back. It's not going to harm anything. It will export it out, but it doesn't harm anything. It's just extra points that, you know, you want to save as much memory as possible with each creature, but it does not affect the Collada export at all. So we're going to start creating our own hierarchy. And so first of all, I want to keep everything nice and neat. And I want a side profile, so I hit number 3. So what's happening is I'm deciding that this is going to be the front of the creature right here, this part. You can't really tell with the slime creature. That's all right. I hit number 3 on the numpad, get them on the side profile. Then I'm going to add what are called empties. This is going to create our hierarchy, and this is how Collada actually understands how to export the entire structure, because this is going to become a lot more complex because it's a creature. You can make this a rock if you wanted to, and it wouldn't really affect anything at this point. But now that we're going to add animations, and we're going to need it to have the ability to attach a camera to it, if you made this an actual playable creature, any of those things, now we have to make a complex hierarchy so that the engine understands how to deal with this creature appropriately. It sounds a little confusing right now, but just bear with me. So right now I'm going to put the cursor, you notice this little red cursor anytime I click the left mouse? I need that in the exact center, and there's a way to do that. Go to Object, go to Snap, get there, and Cursor to Center. Now I'm going to start adding my objects. Now also keep in mind, now this might sound a little weird at first, but I'm in object mode. Notice right here. Now when I add other objects, they're going to be separate entities. Let me select the creature here. If I was in edit mode and I added any objects, it's actually assigned to this object. So we want them as separate objects. So we're going to make sure you're in object mode right here. Make sure your cursor is at the very center. And now we're going to add what's called an empty. And all it is an axis point. I'm going to grab it. That's what it looks like. It looks like a little star. And it's not going to be rendered in the game at all. The computer uses it as a point in space so it can keep track of the various things that we're adding. Over here on the right, so we want to go into properties, click the box, and we'll rename this. We're going to call this mount point in all caps. The mount point is actually to attach this creature to other objects if ever necessary in the future. So it might not be necessary for this creature, but we'll go ahead and add that in as custom. So we'll go ahead and hit Shift D, where we just duplicated that empty, And we're just going to rename this one as mount 0. Now mount 0 is what you're going to attach a weapon to. So you're going to need that. Now with the slime creature, we're going to attach an invisible weapon because it's not necessary to have it visible, but we need it to perform the activities of hitting another object. So it's still important to have a mount object, and I put it right next to the face.
You called it a weapon. I mean, is this where you'll eventually assign damage to this piece when you run into it? Obviously, I can give a slime creature a Gatling gun.
Right.
But so it's going to be when it runs into you, most likely, or gets close enough to you.
Or I can have actually an arm form out of the slime, and that's what I was thinking, and hit the person. So the person will see that happening, but the actual hitting happens from an invisible gun that shoots a projectile at the player. Or you can have what's called a ray cast, where that point in space, that mount point 0 in space, is important to attach that specialized form of weapon that the player doesn't see, but produces a ray cast to hit the player. So after maybe 3 feet in front of it, it knows that the player got hit, and it does an X amount of damage. So I know all this is a little confusing, but just bear with me. All these little things are necessary. So we need to kind of build this hierarchy. So I'm going to go back to the mount point, and it's easier just to Shift D and duplicate these as we go along. We're going to make a base 01. Actually, it should be lowercase. And that's a beginning folder. Go ahead and save this as start 01. And okay, so start. Now notice each one of these creations can be parented to other objects. This is what's going to create our hierarchy. So start 01 and base 01 are almost like folders to Collada when exporting. So these objects are filed into these folders to form a hierarchy. So start 01, we're going to go to parent. This is going to be very important for attaching an armature, which is the skeleton of the creature later on too. We're going to attach it to base 01. Mount, we're going to leave where it is. Mount 0 goes under start or base 01. So any of these empties will go under base 01 except for a few exceptions. We'll go ahead and put mount 01 there too. And let's see, it goes under base 01. So let's open up this hierarchy. Look what happened. So base 01, which is an actual entity out here, is now mounted to mount point, or mount point is mounted to base 01, and mount 0 and start 01 are mounted there. Now we want the object, which is called cube. Let's rename this. What do you want to rename him as, Bob?
Bob is a great name.
We'll rename him as Bob. So the actual slime creature object entity is named Bob. We'll go ahead and attach that to start 01. So all of the actual objects that will be rendered in the game will go under here. As far as little mount points and things like that the engine might need to know, so it knows what happens within that object space, we'll put it under base 01. And all of it goes under base 01 because start 01 is also under base 01, and that includes Bob. So here's one more thing. Let's go ahead and duplicate another empty. Actually, not that one. Let's go to mount 0. Shift D. And we need to name this one. This is going to be for a collision mesh finally. All right. So that's an empty as well. That just tells the engine, hey, you're going to have a collision mesh, so look for that in start 01. This doesn't have to do that for the object unless you have levels of detail, which we'll get into. That's probably beyond our scope right now. Let's not make it too confusing because probably you're looking at this right now and you're like, what in the world is all this?
I know I am.
But it's necessary. I know, just bear with me because we have to make this hierarchy so you know how to make objects appropriately.
So is this hierarchy we're creating, it's more than just for the collision. This is kind of the basis we need to start with the skeleton, for the damage, for the collision, for all of it, right? So you're just building folders underneath,
right?
Essentially, to start organizing.
We're getting this guy ready for some big time cool things. So we have to do all these little steps, and that's fine. We'll make some alterations to the hierarchy later on because this will be necessary for certain objects. Other objects, not so much so.
So if I was starting, I was kind of following your tutorial, but I was creating a skeleton creature. Would I use this exact same folder structure you have here?
I would, yeah. And you would also add an eye point and a cam point, because maybe you want your player to actually use that skeleton creature as a creature later on. So you'd be able to mount the camera wherever that point is. Pretend that let's grab one right here. Pretend that mount 0 was called cam instead. That's actually a point. So what if in the game you told the camera on the player, which allows you to see what's on screen, to detach from your player and attach to the cam point on this creature right here, and it would attach right there. Or I could put it over here. The camera would attach right here on that time. So maybe that's not as, hopefully that's somewhat clear, but it's all these points matter, and it will be important for when you're programming, so that the game knows where to apply certain objects at certain times.
Gotcha.
Especially when it comes to the animations. So, all right, so we have one more object to create, and this is finally our collision mesh. So we're going to go ahead and go to Add, Mesh, Cube. You see the cube right here. We're going to leave it. We're just going to hit S for size. Actually, let's do it like this. Size it. There we go. Now, we're going to grab one face of it. Oh, I'm in edge mode. I was wondering what was going on. There we go. Grab Y. Pull that. You want the box to kind of be completely around the object. Grab Y. Grab X axis. Grab X axis. And that box is completely surrounding this. And actually we can...
Now we packaged them up like a present.
Yeah. So we want this guy to be wire, so now we can see a little bit better. So you can go down here under display and actually change how you want this rendered. It's not going to affect anything unless you were to export.
It's really not how you want it rendered. It's how you want to view it, right?
Right. Because this collision box, we're not going to be able to see the collision box in the game, and there's a way to allow that to happen, and I'll go over that in a moment. Obviously, you don't want to see the box.
Now, why use a square and not a circle or any other shape?
The simpler the shape, the better, because it's less calculations when something hits it. So we can add a little bit of detail to it, but you can never have a concave object. You can't have something that's concaved as a collision mesh. It would mess up the physics. It's not designed for that. And I'm going to just get this nice and even. We'll go into torque real quick. What am I doing? Oh, grab Z axis. I think that's close enough. Now we want this.
Close enough for government work.
Right. Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and we need to name this box collision -1. Okay, so in our hierarchy, the engine goes base 0, 1. Okay, what do we have here? Mount point, cool. A collision mesh I'm going to come up across, and it has mount 0. Okay, fine. And in the folder start 0, 1, we have Bob, our character, and where's that collision mesh? Oh, I forgot to parent it. To start 0, 1. There it is. So it finds the collision mesh that it was told about right here. Later on, we'll go into more detail of why we would have to tell the engine about Bob ever. But and normally you don't. So I think we're good enough. We'll go ahead and save our work.
Are you calling that start 0, 1 because that's the command when you're going to start the game that you're going to run to say, hey, load Bob, load the collision mesh?
No, this is what the engine uses to when first initializing this model into the game world.
Okay.
It uses this hierarchy in order to understand how to load this creature in. Yeah, that's probably a lot clearer.
Got it. Okay.
Slime. Is it not called slime? Okay. Guess we're good. So in theory, you should be able to go into torque and I should not be able to walk into the creature.
That's how we know success. We gauge success by whether we can walk through the slime.
That's right, and we should be able to shoot it, and bullets should bounce off. Let's put you over there. I don't want that mode. Oh, come on. There it is. Remember we were able to walk through it before? Now I can't.
Now it stops you.
That's a good first start. And let's see, what weapon should we test? It's hard to tell with this one. Oh, there it is. See, remember our collision mesh was real outside?
Yeah.
And that's why it does that.
So you'd want to bring that collision mesh in closer.
Right.
So
see, there's the
doesn't have
bullet.
bullet holes way on the
Right.
outside of it.
So we'll add some complexity to the collision mesh, and that's the next step. So let's keep this running. I think I can keep this running without it having a problem. Okay. Now, we want to add complexity to this, but just enough. So we are going to, probably going to need to move us down.
Grab the camera, move it. Don't get rid of us.
All right. So we need to add some more complexity. So on the side here, loop, cut, and slide, my favorite. There we go. We'll go ahead and add another one. You want to keep it as simple as possible. You can probably get away with just shrinking the box enough to where it's pretty much within it, but we're going to add some more complexity to it. Now, what did I mean by concave? Well, if I were to take this vertice and pull it down, this is now concave instead of being convex, which is either flat or actually it's outward. That's fine. This is not. So physics calculates outward positions of the facets here. So keep that in mind. So
What will happen if you did the concave?
it can potentially crash the engine.
Okay.
So it don't want to do that, especially when somebody's in the middle of playing your game. One of the greatest games in the world, and it crashes because you made
You made the mistake of wanting a concave. Don't concave, kids.
Don't
Only
concave
leads to
in.
bad things.
All right. Let's grab Y. Let's pull this guy in.
So you can lean in the corners, like Leaning Tower of Pisa, in towards each other like a triangle.
Right.
Okay.
That's okay, as long as you don't form a concave type. All right. Grab that in. The simpler, the better. It's less calculations. Physics, eats up a lot of CPU calculations.
What's neat about this to me is everything's really about trickery of the eye. Right? I mean, you're not really making that monster itself the collision. You're putting an invisible box around it, and then you're keep adjusting the shape until it looks like it's actually hitting that monster, but it's really hitting that collision box the whole time. It's all trickery of the eye
Now,
the gamer doesn't see when they're playing, right?
that's right. There's, of course, better systems than what this is. And they just deal with calculations more efficiently. So you may not have to create something like this. There's actually in Torque, it's called PolySoup, and you can just click one button and it will render a very complex collision mesh for you. Actually, it's all the original facets of your whatever creature or not creature, but object that you bring in. The problem is it will not do that for complex objects such as creatures. PolySoup is for objects that remain in the same position, such as trees or rocks and things like that. Then the calculations doesn't have to account for the movement of the object while it's being hit at the same time. Gotcha. And that's a huge difference between the two. And that's why it can do that for inanimate objects, if you will. So we got that going. Torque is still running, so we'll go ahead and export. See, it's at an angle.
Oh yeah, look at that.
It's not perfect.
It looks like they're inside, but that's what you keep messing with. You keep pulling in those corners,
right,
until you get it to show the way you want it to show.
Right. So I think this works out well.
Now, if it was your game and you were using a sword or something, how do you change those bullet animations into like slices? Is that a separate?
Well, see, the bullets have an on trigger feature. Obviously, when the player hits the key, it shoots. Mm-hmm. So it's doing a series of things. It goes through a state machine. It goes, what sound am I supposed to play? Do I have any bullets, first of all? If you have bullets, then play the fire sound. Produce projectiles starting at the mount point. And actually, it'll be the nozzle point on weapons.
So is that like the arms that we just kind of started building out the file system for you were talking about?
Right.
You build out a file system with the mount points of that gun to say, hey, this is where the mount point
for the physical object, yeah. And then we have to program and we take advantage of the system knowing where those points are. So I want the nozzle point to be at the nozzle end of the gun so the engine knows where to start that projectile, which when you fires outward. And you notice when you see a little green, you see that little green symbol in this creature, you see the little green symbol in that. Every object when you're in world editor mode has that. Now notice the ground when I shoot it, the green symbol will happen for the bullet that hit the ground. Oh, yeah. And then it disappears. So why did it do that? Well, it needed to put that decal there, then it makes the decal disappear. So all these things work together, and it's actually very complex. But we started the hierarchy, so that's part of the shapes hierarchies being constructed, and then we can go in and manipulate that hierarchy later on for whatever needs we have, such as animation and in regards to getting AI working for this slime creature, so it starts moving.
Run into that thing one more time. Oh, look, you can't go through it no more. The slime creature is a solid slime creature. You know, I think about it, you may want to left the slime creature so you could just go through it.
Yeah, might have been.
Yeah.
Or as you went through it, maybe it slowed you down.
So if you got nothing out of this video and you're like, well, that stuff was way too complex, you can just leave it, wait for the next video where we add the skeleton and stuff in, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not easy. It takes time for you to get used to it. But I promise you that if you stick with it, it will be great.
Watch these videos in series and follow along in the steps, and then as you get these different things done and we start doing more things, it's going to make more sense to you.
Right.
Well, thank you, Chad, for coming back to the channel. We appreciate it. Next time we're going to be doing skeletal structure and that type of stuff.
It was called the armature, so that'll allow us to start moving, and maybe we can export a root shape where the slime is just breathing.
Nice.
So just something simple, and it's not going to be any easier, but if you have to get used to that in order to do that for any engine, really, in regards to animations, you have to learn the armature portion. Awesome. So,
all right. Well, thank you so much for joining the channel. Leave your comments below. Show some love. Greater Gods and Nemesis. If you're into alpha testing, that type of thing, go check out Gods and Nemesis out there on Steam right now, and you could test it and give feedback, and he will implement all of those changes and fixes. You've done a whole bunch of new stuff with Gods and Nemesis in between making videos for me. So lots of new things. And then Chapter 2 of Gods and Nemesis will be coming out soon. And then, you know, there are some rumors out there that you may be looking at Linux eventually to export your game to. So
I would like to make some tests on doing that.
So put some pressure in the comments below to tell him that you support the game, get it out there on Linux. So until next time, thank you guys for watching, and get out there and fill your brains.
Don't get subscribed. Does not like the video.